Hello new friends and welcome back to the channel. So this is a one-off type of video for now, unless of course I decide to keep going with these chapter-specific short stories to go along with the lore videos in the future. So what this video basically is a fanfiction, because I'm as nerdy as it fucking gets. One of the groups I was a part of for Warhammer held a contest to write a short story based off a single picture of the person's choosing. With the picture I chose, I decided to write the story you're about to hear, and funny enough, I won the contest with it. Though the original version of the story was only a third of what it is now, I expanded the story a fair bit and decided to make it into its own video. That'd be why my first Warhammer video was lore on the Lamenters chapter. As this short story is, you guessed it, gold sticker star for you, about the Lamenters. Before we get into the story I've been rambling on about, make sure you hit those like and sub buttons to make this your safe place. And now with that bit of self-promo out of the way, let's get to it with the tale entitled A Lamenter's Hope. Sergeant Belith of the Lamenters' 3rd Company stood vigil as Apothecary Caduceus went about his duties in retrieving gene seed from the fallen battle brothers of the 3rd Company. All but them had fallen against the claw and bite of the tyrannid Broodlord and its guard retinue, though their lives were not lost in vain, as all the Xenos lay devastated. Even so, there was a familiar melancholy which gripped the sergeant's twin hearts. Such thoughts did not have time to take root as a servo skull approached. It was obviously damaged, but such damage seemed superficial, apart from its box being non-operational. This led the servo skull to doing a series of wistful movements, at first dismissed as nonsensical patterns, until something whispered into Sergeant Bella's psyche.
Follow. Import. Haste.
Why such words stuck within his mind and made themselves clear was something for the chaplains and librarians to divine later, but for the interim, Sergeant Belith began to follow the servo skull, which dutifully took up leading the Lamenter, bringing a justification to his hunch.
Brother Caduceus, continue your work. Reinforcements will arrive shortly to recover our brothers and their holy relics. I'm going to scout for more of our fallen kin.
Granted, the confidence with which he spoke was pure corpse starch. The apothecary returned the hail over the box.
I will, Sergeant. The Emperor protects.
At such a reply, Sergeant Belith felt no need to speak further. The only thing which felt necessary was to draw his Phobos-patterned bolt pistol into his offhand, and a customized power sword, upon being appointed sergeant of the 3rd Company, though it was difficult to discern beneath the layer of tyrannid gore which currently defiled the sword. The artesian-level craftsmanship was second to none. Corpses of varied tyrannid bioforms, civilians, guardsmen, and the occasional battle brother littered the streets of 6 of 5, where the Lamenters engaged a splinter of High Fleet Kraken. Apart from the gore, the streets were gravid with debris of destruction to such a degree it wouldn't be an insult to call the city now a ruin. A heightened state of awareness was kept, though, apart from his own armored footfalls, Sergeant Belith did little else, choosing to make box recordings of any battle brothers that had been discovered instead of noting them within the tactical map upon his wrist computer. Once again, a slight gloom began to grip at him. Battle brothers he'd served with for centuries, now lifeless shells, their gene seed to be collected later for future aspirants. At least his brothers had died serving the Emperor. However, these guardsmen, these innocent civilians who'd fallen, they had little to defend themselves with, and even in the face of such abysmal odds they continued to do so, in the face of enemies devoid of any intentions but hunger. Once again, Sergeant Belith was pulled from darkened thoughts that had been with him for the last few kilometers, as the servo skull looped thrice in front of him, before taking off to follow the side of a building to their east. It was a place that the sergeant recognized. A fortnight ago, this position had been given to the 4th Company to hold and had been lost under the initial surge led by the Broodlord, which had been dispatched not but an hour ago by the 3rd Company. It was presumed the entirety of the 4th Company, along with its garrison of guardsmen, had been lost entirely. a story which was further confirmed as more coordinate locations for Battle Brothers' corpses were vox-logged with each step around the outskirts of this temple erected to the God Emperor of mankind. This path was necessary, as even though it had been breached, the main doors which opened to the street remained sealed and barricaded shut, a testament that it was not only the sons of Dorn who knew how to fortify a location for a siege. Each corpse passed on the outskirts of the building told that they'd been gone for near a week, although with some of them there was very little left to guess from. Rounding a corner onto a short passageway which ended in a breached side entrance, the bereaved sergeant once again felt a tingle of gloom down his spine with each footfall drawing him ever closer into hallowed ground. A swing of his power sword cut through what little remained of the door's barricade in his path, thus allowing the room to gain enough natural light that the scene of defilement and xeno-heresy could be seen. More bodies of innocent civilians, guardsmen, and battle brothers were strewn about this holy place. It was then Sergeant Bell caught sight of the servo skull having come to a swaying hover beside something which he didn't believe to be possible. A battle brother still standing before the only stained glass mural window that remained intact, depicting the Emperor victorious upon the field of battle. This glorious battle brother mirrored such a daunting image, surrounded by tyrannid corpses that had been piled up, hacked, stacked, or slumped all around to the stalwart Astartes. Excitement set adrenaline to task throughout his veins. Action happened before thought as knees braced before a leap assisted by his jump pack brought Sergeant Belleth within reach, having landed at his battle brother's flank.
"Brother, by our father's mercy, I was sure none would be."
Words spoken in a hearty, jovial tone were abruptly bitten off as he circled around, only to discover where once was ceramite armor, embellished with purity seals and other trinkets of import, now was a husk, with multiple gaping holes punched and cut through the ceramite cuirass. Enough mortal wounds struck it mattered not to count them.
"By the golden throne."
However, it became apparent this warrior lived when smoke vented from his helmet with a rattling, labored breath as the servo eyes, which were still functional in the broken visor, locked onto him, all but one failing in the task. Although this Astartes was unable to move, it felt as if the temperature of the room dropped significantly. If fear was even a possible response, had there been hair on his neck to stand up, Sergeant Bella thought it most certainly would have. Every cell of life left within the Astartes before the sergeant permeated with a malicious intent, if only briefly before it sharply faded, when the dying battle brother realized it was kin who stood at his side. It was then a sound could be heard. A muffled gurgling cry broke the spell of silence. A metallic clang echoed as a combat knife hit the floor. The unnamed brother's hand gripped at the edge of a wound which had most certainly obliterated his secondary heart. That expenditure of energy was enough to cause a knee to buckle. The stone floor cracked as said knee impacted into it. A wet squelch of flesh brought something into view which cast Sergeant Belleth down to his knees with jaw aghast. From the inertia of a fall and a sudden stop, an infant had been drawn forth from the fatal wound where once a heart existed. Now the blood-covered wailing child rested against the armored fingertips which protected it from the sharp edges of broken ceramite. With a surprising gentleness, Sergeant Belleth, having holstered his bolter and sheathed his sword, reached forth to take the wailing child onto his palm, asking to himself what exactly had transpired here in the sight of the Emperor and the dead. Sergeant Belleth could hear the servo eyes within his kin's helmet following each movement made. Thus, for the first time since catching sight of the little one, Sergeant Belleth looked away to give his awe-stricken gaze upon the unnamed brother. Once again an epiphany struck the sergeant, where the first time he attempted to divine the silent message of a dancing servo skull, it was now he had been attempting to divine the words necessary to speak, and yet he knew the words already. He'd spoken them countless times and would speak them countless more. Sergeant Belleth brought his left hand, which cradled the no longer crying infant, up against his side, reaching out to rest his gauntlet upon his battle brother's pauldron.
"For those we cherish, we die in glory."
With the words spoken, it was apparent his kin had received the Emperor's peace, as the labored breath ceased, and the red glow of his exposed servo eye that had stalwartly watched over the infant had faded to inactivity at the cessation of life signs. Thus a broken, beaten, and shattered body fell to rest upon the ground. Upon the passing of his kin, Sergeant Beleth looked to the little one resting comfortably in his grasp as he rose to stand once more.
Come, little one, let us bring the news to our brothers so that they may rejoice.